Which 8th level spells are the best 8th level spells? This week I give my ranking of the top 5 8th level spells in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Hello players and GMs, I am Reese and welcome to another video by Jetpack7. Before we get started, I just want to ask you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell if you haven't already. Every little contribution makes a huge difference to the visibility of my channel, so if you're a fan and want to help me out, that is absolutely the very best way to do it. This week I am continuing my spell rankings video with the penultimate spell level, 8th level. We're starting to get close to the end of these rankings, and I've got to say, my opinions on a lot of these spells in this game have changed quite a bit. The more I look at them and truly consider where their strengths and weaknesses lie, the more I realize how flexible 5e actually is in practice. On paper, it all seems so rigid, but when you make multiple videos about the exact same subject, you really have to think about things in unconventional ways, and that has given me such a different perspective on this game than before. So I wanted to give everyone who's watched any of these videos a big thank you for joining me, because even if you don't agree with my rankings, I think I've gotten a lot out of this series in terms of game knowledge, and I hope I've gotten you all thinking about it as well. Anyway, enough with all that, let's talk about 8th level spells. These spells are all super strong, I think that goes without saying. The second highest level of spell is bound to contain some seriously powerful wallops, especially since, generally speaking, you can only cast one of them per day. So this is a spell that you have to choose from a list and think, yeah, this is a spell I can only use once, and I will definitely get my money's worth out of it. And that's a pretty big ask with the number of potent spells on this list. Like I've said before, once we get to these higher levels, there is a pretty even mix of utility and damage, so your options truly are wide open depending on what your party needs, making these levels even more difficult to choose. That said, in this video, I'll give you my perspective so that hopefully I can help narrow those choices down a little bit. Let's get right into it. Starting off at number 5 with one of the most crippling single target spells in the entirety of 5th edition, Feeble Mind. Now, let me be clear, against certain targets, this spell won't do a whole lot. If you're trying to put down a rampaging beast or something that doesn't really rely on its intellect to fight, then this spell won't do a whole lot at all. However, against its intended targets like humanoids or really any relatively intelligent creature, particularly casters of any sort, this spell will absolutely ruin them, possibly forever. You're essentially turning the target into a beast, intelligent enough to only identify its friends and know it needs to protect them. Once the creature fails the save, they can repeat it once every 30 days. That's it. Unless they have access to Greater Restoration, Heal, or Wish, they can't try this save again until 30 days later. And if they fail again, they wait another 30 days. That's what I mean by possibly forever. There is a chance that the target literally never recovers from this. Now, obviously that's a little excessive when discussing the implications on a single combat, but even without considering the long-term repercussions, the fact is that once a creature fails this save, there isn't another opportunity within that combat to try it again. So this is definitely one of the better spells in 5e at completely neutralizing a particular target, and is definitely the kind of spell I want in my spellbook at this point in the game, even compared to all the other incredibly powerful spells surrounding it. In 4th place, I have the spell Clone. This one is pretty simply a get out of jail free card, a second chance, and quite possibly one of the best ways to prank your party into thinking your character is dead forever. The spell just allows you to die once without having to face any of the consequences of dying. No resurrection needed, your soul just pops right back into your backup body and you can continue on with life as usual. Your party will mourn their loss, cry tears over your passing, and then come home to find you waiting patiently for their return. Pair this with spells that allow you to get right back to combat, like teleport, and instant summons to bring all your items back to your clone's bedside, and suddenly you can be back into combat in no time at all, so this spell can even serve a helpful purpose mechanically in combat if it comes to that. That is a pretty niche use of it, however, so I suspect the most value you'll get out of this card is a get out of jail free card, which is still massively beneficial considering how expensive resurrections can get at this point in the game. Oh, did I mention that this is also probably the easiest method to achieving eternal life in 5e? Because the moment you create another clone, all you have to do is not die for the next 120 days and you'll just return to that clone whenever you die. You can make it a younger version of yourself, so even if your character dies of old age, their soul will just pop right back into the younger version of themselves with all the wisdom, memories, and abilities the older body has gained. So yeah, Lichdom from an 8th level spell without all the messed up bits. That's not too bad. Now, I think I've said this in a couple videos at this point, but spells that cause an effect without giving any opportunity for a saving throw are absolutely incredible, especially when you get later into the game and all the bosses you're fighting have legendary resistance. Well, allow me to introduce you to the spell that doesn't allow a saving throw at all, at any point in its effect, Maze. Now, granted, the DC for the creature to escape isn't ridiculously high at a DC 20 intelligence check, but that can still be a huge difference in a boss fight. Getting them out of combat for even a single round can be game-changing, but the chance of keeping them locked away for even longer could swing a fight so heavily in your favor that I am absolutely willing to put the spell in the top 3 here. Now, I don't know about you all, but when we are in a fight, my players are constantly keeping track of how many legendary resistances they've burned through. So when you find an ability that doesn't use legendary resistances, that is a massive boon in any fight. Not to mention, if you're fighting a creature with low intelligence, the odds of them escaping can be much smaller than the DM would like, allowing your party to set up the battlefield for that creature's inevitable return, and using a free round of combat to absolutely pepper that creature with damage and debilitating effects. Needless to say, Maze can turn the course of a fight and is definitely one of my favorite spells to use on a PC as well. So I'd say it deserves a top 3 placement, no doubt. In second place, I have one of my favorite spells that may not be a popular pick, but is one that I will constantly fight for, Antipathy, Sympathy. This spell offers options and fun interactions that a lot of spells in the game couldn't dream of. There are a couple things that it can do that are obvious. Lock enemies down in a tight spot, forcing them to move towards a selected area. Alternatively, getting enemies away from a spot, keeping them away from your healer or squishy wizard by casting Antipathy targeting the ally you want to protect. That's already pretty nice, but the spell can do a lot more than that. There's a lot happening in this spell's description that makes its real power kind of difficult to fully grasp upon first reading it. First of all, the duration. 10 days. Whatever object or creature you cast the spell on will be enchanted with the spell for 10 days, which means you can cast it days ahead of an encounter, get your 8th level spell slot back, switch out spells, and then get to the fight locked and loaded. Not to mention, any creature enchanted by the targeted object might be enchanted for at least 1 day, but for up to 10 days. Now, that is assuming they aren't able to break it, which they won't be able to, unless the enchanted object deals damage to them or they get 60 feet away from it and out of line of sight. Essentially, if you cast Sympathy on a rock, targeting whatever type of creature you will be fighting, pocket that rock and then whip it out in the fight, you can have that creature on a tight leash for up to 10 days. Now, it doesn't say anything about the creature being unable to attack you, of course, but there is also the possibility that you were never in range for the attack to begin with, because you can also cast this on an object that a creature just happens to walk by, like, I don't know, a rock on a pathway, the entrance to your home base, hell, the entrance to their home base if you've got the time. And if they fail that initial save on Sympathy, they're stuck for at least 24 hours, and there is nothing they can do to break that hold other than dispelling the spell. So yeah, obviously I think Sympathy is the more powerful of the two options, but keeping enemies away from a person or place isn't half bad either. The biggest downside of the spell is that it takes an hour to cast, so you're not going to bust this out in combat, but there are so many ways to keep an object out of eyesight until you need it, that is kind of irrelevant unless you're being surprised by whatever creature type you're fighting. Pro tip, I'd recommend avoiding targeting humanoids, if at all possible. And finally, in first place, I've got one of the most powerful support spells in the entirety of 5th edition, Holy Aura. This spell kind of speaks for itself. All creatures have disadvantage on all attacks against all of your allies, and your allies gain advantage on every single one of their saving throws. That is clearly huge, like really massive. No other spell in the game does anything quite like that, not to mention that if the creatures you're fighting are fiends or undead, there's also a chance that they get blinded every single time they try to attack your allies. I mean, really, if you're fighting a big undead or fiend encounter with the spell, it's just going to be straight up impossible for you to lose because of this one spell. Another little part of this spell that is great is the fact that your allies only have to be within range when you cast the spell. So once you've cast it, they can run off and live their Holy Aura lives without having to worry about staying close to you. Pop this at the start of combat, and suddenly your party members just got a massive boost in defense for the better part of the fight, doubling the chances of a successful save and doubling the chances of a missed attack by an enemy. Sounds pretty powerful, because it is. It is absolutely game-changing. So I think Holy Aura has a very solid place as one of the strongest spells in the game, especially at 8th level. Alright, that is my list of the top 5 8th level spells in my opinion. Let me know in the comments what you all think of these spells. Have you had any success using them in your encounters? If you liked this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel, and as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all around.